You're so fucking lazy, man. You're just making podcasts.
Yes.
Build a movement, right?
Yes.
Get people out in the streets, right?
Yeah.
Have an actual plan.
Welcome back to the Punters Politics Podcast, the podcast that makes politics simple for the everyday punter like me, Conrad, and not like Punter James again because it's still on a couple of bonus episodes while Conrad is on a half break and James is kicking back doing sweet FA. Now, to the bonus interview with a puntermon that I've collected. I've known of him for probably 6 or 7 years, and his name is puntermon Rutger Bregman. If you've never heard that name, that's okay. He is a Dutch historian, very obscure, but he came to fame and prominence 6 years or so ago where he was a guest at a rich punt festival called Davos. It's where the World Economic Forum, all these rich punts get together. Like, I'm talking wealthy, rich punts who think they can solve the world's problems. And they get together and have like conferences and talk and get guest speakers to whatever. And everyone gives their great, grand, big ideas and then go back to tax evasion and not paying tax and exploiting their workforce and destroying the environment because it makes them lots of money. And Rutger Bregman, he was on one of these panels, and this really rocketed him to prominence. And watch this video, and after you watch this, you'll understand why he got so much attention after this. Let's take a listen to what he said. So he's sitting on a panel with 6 or 7 other people, and I think this is the first opportunity he's got to speak now.
This is my first time at Davos, and I find it quite a bewildering experience, to be honest. I mean, 1,500 private jets have flown in here to hear Sir David Attenborough speak about, how we're wrecking the planet. And I hear people talk in the language of participation and justice and equality and transparency. But then, almost no one raises the real issue of tax avoidance, right? And of the rich just not paying their fair share.
I wonder if it's rich people with those private jets who are the ones not paying what they owe.
It feels like I'm at a fighters conference and no one's allowed to speak about water. This is not rocket science. We can talk for a very long time about all these stupid philanthropy schemes. We can invite Bono once more, but come on, we got to be talking about taxes. Yeah, exactly. That's it. Taxes. All the rest is bullshit, in my opinion.
All the rest is bullshit. So he didn't pull any punches. I gotta say, I agree. The same people in there having a wank fest about their philanthropy after making billions of dollars by rigging the rules. This is how you get $1 billion in any country. You rig the rules. Once you're a 100 millionaire, you rig the rules to become a billionaire. You get the government to give you special government contracts, special tax breaks. Rupert Murdoch is the exact example brought up last week on the pod. News Corp doesn't pay any tax. They use tax havens offshore and dodge. That's what they do. And then they go to these events and go, but I gave $1 million to some poor people. But not systemically just fulfilling their social contract to society and infrastructure that they use, the workforce that they use, the roads, the hospitals, the schools to educate their kids, the stable democracy that is required for them to have a thriving business is all built off the back of infrastructure that we punters have paid for to build. And these ones leverage it the most to make the most amount of money and then decide that they are too smart or don't need to pay their money. So that piqued a lot of people's interest. I was like, yeah, bloody hell, it's all bullshit in his opinion. Totally bloody agree. Now, this is where it gets really, this is where Punter James and my world collides because it gets very Gossip Girl in this next one. So he, after this, sticking it to the elites, like the World Economic Forum, sucked in European elites. But no one likes sticking it more to the quote-unquote vaguely defined elites than Rupert Murdoch's propaganda machine named Fox News in America. And there's an old anchor who used to be on the show, quite a headline, got millions of views on Murdoch's channel, named Tucker Carlson. He's American. And they invited Rutger Bregman on to talk about how he's stuck it to the elites and they're so hypocritical and sucked in. Good on you for sticking it up the elites. But it goes south very quickly and this interview was never aired. And so that's why the audio from Tucker Carlson is bad, because it's only being recorded in one side, because I presume Rutger went into a studio in another country and then linked in with Tucker Carlson in America. It doesn't have Tucker Carlson's side of the tape. So let's take a watch and see how badly it goes. It goes for much longer than this. I would recommend everyone watching it because it's like nail-bitingly cringe at some points. You're like, oh, this is so awkward, but here we go.
So I think the issue really is one of corruption and of people being bribed and of not being, not talking about the real issues. What the family, what the Murdochs basically want you to do is to scapegoat immigrants instead of talking about tax avoidance. So I'm glad you're now finally raising the issue, but that's what been happening for the past couple of years.
Uh-huh. And I'm taking orders from the Murdochs. Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, it doesn't work that directly. But I mean, you've been part of the Cato Institute, right? You've been a senior fellow there for years. You've been taking their dirty money. They're funded by billionaires,
Wait, why don't you tell me how it does work?
Well, it works by you taking their dirty money. It's as easy as that. I mean, you are a millionaire funded by billionaires. That's what you are. It's true, right? It's true, right? That all the anchors on Fox, they're all millionaires. How is this possible? Well, it's very easy. You're just not talking about certain things.
Fox doesn't even play where you are.
It doesn't play where you are. Well, have you heard of the internet? I can watch things whatever I want,
Have you heard of the internet?
I have, actually. I can't say I'm a great fan of your show, but I do my homework when you invite me on your show. So, I mean, you're probably not going to air this, but I went to Davos to speak truth to power, and I'm doing exactly the same thing right now. You might not like it, but you're a millionaire funded by billionaires, and that's the reason why you're not talking about these issues.
But I am talking about these issues.
Yeah, only now. Come on, you jumped the bandwagon. You're all like, oh, I'm against the globalist elite, blah, blah, blah.
Wow. So that didn't go well. So yeah, that is where Rutger Bregman kind of popped into. All of a sudden, everyone's like, what's a Dutch historian talking about? And since then, he's written a few books about how we look at history and what's been done in the past and what steps we can take to begin to try and fix the system. So I got him on because I wanted to discuss, what can we do? I'm always pointing out the problem, what's going on. And I would like a slap upside the head. Is there anything more we can do? Because raising awareness, maybe we can, that just can't be it. What can we do more to begin to shift the needle on society's biggest problems when we're just everyday regular punters? So here is my interview with Punterman, Dutch historian Rutger Bregman. Rutger Bregman, thanks for joining the Punters on the Punters Politics podcast.
Thanks for having me. Great to be with the Punters.
Now, quick question. Do you know, what's a punter to you if you hear that word?
I have no idea. Is it like a pundit or something?
You're closer than most people. So in Australia, a punter is a gambler, like someone who'll place bets, but it's more frequently becoming just your everyday person. You're just your regular Joe, your average Joe, as the Americans would say. But in America, the punter is a kicker. But in London, in England, a punter is someone who gets prostitutes. So I just thought I'd ask.
Okay. Well, I would say that a punter, as in being a gambler, is actually the opposite of a pundit. Like, pundits have no skin in the game whatsoever. They just give their opinions. They're wrong all the time, and they don't pay a price. But gamblers, when they're wrong, it costs them a lot of money.
Yes, and I guess with punter and politics, when we get politics wrong, we all pay a price, and we're all just placing bets and hoping for the best. You've written a fair few books critiquing, I suppose, broad-scale political systems and our current structures. Give me what the punters would call just the TLDR on the books you've written, landing on the book you've written now. What's your general arc and critique of the system? Because it looks like you've been through a journey with the different books you've written.
Okay, so let me try to give the shortest versions of my books. I've written 3 of them. I spent about a decade writing them. The first one was called Utopia for Realists. And it was basically me being very annoyed at how boring modern politics was.
Okay.
I was listening to politicians and I was like, this is not awesome enough. This is not ambitious enough. Like, people on the left say, let's increase taxes on the rich a little bit and, let's have a little less poverty. And I was like, no. Abolish poverty, right? That's what I want to hear.
Yeah, fair enough.
You say, like, work a little bit less, better work-life balance. And I was like, no, I want to 15-hour work week. That's what we were promised, right? That was the goal of capitalism, to make us all super rich so that we can have endless leisure time.
Yeah.
So that was the first book, 2014. Then the next book was called Humankind. I started to realize that many of my crazy utopian ideas relied on a different view of who we are as a species, a more hopeful view. And as you know, Netflix is all Black Mirror these days. And that's basically true for, I would say, the whole of Western culture. A lot of pessimism there. And the idea that civilization is just a thin veneer and that below that veneer lies raw human nature, which basically is to say that we humans are all evil and selfish. And so I wrote a big book, 500 pages, arguing that actually we're pretty good, or at least pretty
Not that
decent.
bad.
Yeah, so that came out during the pandemic when everyone's hoarding toilet paper. I would say suboptimal timing, but still believe in it. And then at some point, I started seeing some of my readers reading Humankind and posting pictures of themselves on a beautiful beach in Bali or something like that, or a tropical island, saying, "Oh, life is wonderful. Read Rutger's books. Be happy. Stop following the news. Just enjoy life." And I was like, oh no, I've created a monster. So if my previous book, Humankind, was like a warm hug, I thought the next one should be a cold, refreshing shower. It's a bit like a self-help book, but the kind of self-help book that you wish you'd never read, because now you have to do something. And that's Moral Ambition, my latest book that came out just last month. And it's really a guide on how to live a very meaningful life devoted to the greatest challenges we face as a species, to basically make those utopias that I talked about in my very first book make it reality.
Is there a thread of common critique that you keep, I guess, it sounds like you're repackaging into different ways to begin a conversation and propel action to what?
It really depends on whom you ask. So I guess people on the right would say that many of my ideas are perhaps too naive, that in the end, people are just selfish, that we're not going to be able to make that progress that I so desperately hope for, or that even some of my goals are not the right ones. The biggest pushback I get from the people on the left is that perhaps I have too much faith in individuals. So people on the left, they love spending a lot of time giving critiques of these big systems, right? They say, oh, there's something deeply wrong with capitalism, or we got to overthrow the patriarchy. And sometimes I'm interested in those critiques, but I think they can become excuses as well. Like the Catholic Church used to sell those indulgences, right? So that you can save your soul. You buy this little text that says, yes, like 10,000 fewer years in purgatory. And sometimes that's what it feels to me, like that there's a left-wing indulgence. Like you, as long as you say loudly enough, abolish capitalism, then you don't have to do much yourself, right? And I've just always believed that real change often starts with small groups of thoughtful, committed citizens, that in the end, it's up to us. And I've always believed in human agency and never liked people complaining on the sidelines, acting as bystanders. While, we are all the captains of our own ship. And I think that if you really have a plan and are committed, then you can change the course of history.
On the political left, they will critique a system, a broken system. If I'm pointing out how corporations control the Australian government interest and it's really ripping you off, and the reaction I get to that critique, you're taking away my agency. Like, I don't want to feel helpless.
Yeah. And look, there's a right-wing indulgence as well. The right-wing indulgence or excuse would be something like, hey, we've got really big systematic problems, and you keep saying, oh, you can just pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, right? That's another way of avoiding a difficult conversation. So, there are like different versions of this avoidance behavior on both sides of the political spectrum. But in my view, the important thing in the end is to actually do something. So in my new book, I talk a lot about the abolitionists who built the greatest movement for human rights that this world has ever seen. And this started as a really small group. It started in Britain in the mid-18th century. Like there were in total maybe 50, maybe 100 abolitionists in the whole country who believed that the slave trade was deeply immoral and that slavery had to be abolished. And they built this extraordinary movement. And maybe most importantly, of the 12 founders of the British Society for the Abolition of the Slave Trade, 10 were entrepreneurs. So these were people who knew how to get shit done, how to build a company, how to, execute on long to-do lists. And that's something I've come to be deeply inspired by. Yeah, just like the gamblers versus the pundits we talked about at the beginning. Yeah, it's important to have some skin in the game.
When you begin your journey with an early book, Utopia for Realists, you're putting out these ideas, these ambitious ideas that people will poo-hoo and say, we can never get there. And it looks like you discover that there has to be a set of ideas that people believe in order to believe that utopia is sort of possible. And it sounds like this recent book you're landing the plane on. Now we've got the ideas. If we see humanity is good and it's possible to get this utopia. Mm-hmm. And then this one is practically how the bloody hell do we get there? Who is this book, I suppose, for specifically?
Really for everyone who's interested in changing the world in the course of history. Really anyone who's interested in living a morally ambitious life. So moral ambition for me is the combination of the idealism of an activist plus the ambition of an entrepreneur. So you don't just want to wallow in your own moral purity. You actually want to achieve results. You want to make progress for the people and animals that you care so much about. So in the book, I spend a lot of time studying the abolitionists, the suffragettes who fought for women's right to vote. But it's also important to look at other movements on the other side of the political spectrum. I think we can learn a lot from, for example, the rise of the neoliberals, right? Who had this master plan that they executed on since the 1950s to take over from social democracy and to privatize huge sectors of the economy, to make sure that tax rates for the rich would go down and down and down. This was a multi-decade-long plan. They built out a huge ecosystem. In the US, where I currently live, they started with a memorandum, an infamous memorandum called the Powell Memo. It was written in 1971 by a corporate lawyer named Lewis Powell. And this was basically a blueprint. There's a great podcast about this right now called Master Plan. And they created this ecosystem of the Heritage Foundation, now infamous for Project 2025, the Federalist Society that, created this conservative legal revolution and led to the Dobbs decision, the overthrow of Roe v. Wade, and the end of the federal right to abortion. The American Enterprise Institute, that advised on privatizing huge parts of the economy. It's just, it's not my politics, but it's incredible. Like I'm in awe of this perseverance, like the drive to really build something that's much bigger than you. That in a way they won in American politics. Like someone like Trump really did not come out of nowhere. It's just a symptom of this decade-long plan. And that's the same thing when I study other movements. Like the women's rights movement in the US, it took 75 years to get women the right to vote. It's a history of losing. It's a history of failing. Like you don't want to know. Like they lost so many elections and referenda and campaigns that were unsuccessful. But they just kept pushing and pushing and building out the ecosystem. And of the 68 women who came together at Seneca Falls in 1848, only one was still alive in 1920 when women finally got the right to vote. And by the way, Seneca Falls was the first women's right convention. So I don't know. This for me is just social physics, right? You got to study these people who actually steer the oil tanker in a different direction, did change the course of history, and then learn from them. It's not necessarily that they're all like our moral heroes, but yeah, they show you what it takes.
Well, that is incredibly depressing that if we do what we can to change a system, maybe one punter will be alive to see it if we track the slow process of change, which as a historian, is that the trend? Is this the trend? If we want to make change, it's not for you, mate. It might be for your kids if you're lucky, but probably for your grandkids.
I think it's not depressing at all. I think it's deeply inspiring. For me, it's almost like a kind of religion, right? Today, we all live these secular lives in which we often struggle to find meaning. But what these people did is they put their lives in service of something that was much bigger than them. And the reason we remember them today, the reason they, in a way, are almost immortal is because they were part of a much bigger movement. And sometimes it can also give you hope. Like, for example, I am someone who cares deeply about animal rights. I think that the way we treat animals is the worst atrocity of our time, probably, and one of the greatest moral catastrophes. 80 billion animals get slaughtered every year, and they live in conditions that pretty much no one would find acceptable if they really see how these animals are being treated. Now, we've created an insanely complicated system to make sure that we never see that and we never have to think about it. But it's pretty horrific once you open your eyes to it. Now, I think it's going to take a long, long time to get rid of factory farming. But it also gives me hope that these movements in the past were successful at that, and that I can find some solace in the fact that I'm just a small part in a much bigger movement, right? And that there will be people fighting this fight 50 years from now, and that they count on me to do what I can right now. So that's perhaps the optimistic take. For me, it gives life a lot of meaning. Almost like as if there's life after death because of...
I keep reframing it in just individualistic, consumeristic terms. What I'm hearing from you is I will get some meaning and purpose in my meaningless life if I attach myself to a larger historical tradition where someone can stand on my shoulders, the shade of a tree of which I will never see, and I get something from that. So that's
Well, look, at the beginning of the book, and I quote this to you, there's a quote from Leo Rosten, the writer, that has always meant a lot to me. And he wrote, "I cannot believe that the purpose of life is to be happy. I think the purpose of life is to be useful, to be responsible, to be honorable, to be compassionate. It is, above all, to matter, to count, to stand for something, to have it make some difference, that you lived it all." So, I guess that's like the, 20-word summary of of this whole book. It's a kind of way of looking at life. I'm not saying that happiness is unimportant, obviously not. But I do think that a rich, well-rounded life is about much more than that. You don't want to let morality suck up everything. Like there's more. I mean, I'm a dad of 2 kids, so for me, parenthood is very important. I don't know. I like wasting time on silly computer games, having fun conversations, drinking beer. I mean, all of that is important. But you have one life, you have a career, you might as well do something good with it. And the reality right now is that around 25% of people, according to the best evidence we have, are stuck in a socially meaningless job. People themselves are saying it about their own jobs, that they don't contribute anything to the welfare of society. And that waste of talent, to me, is the greatest waste of our time.
I guess even before we come to the kick in the nuts or the cold shower that you're providing in this book, which is like, if we want to get to a better future, let's attach ourselves to each other, to a history of change, to progress that we'll never see. We'll get meaning, purpose, and all of those things, and we can make the world a better place, even if it seems difficult, hard, and a tough journey. Before we even get there, I'm wondering if we have to even first establish your perspective on the direction we are going. You've famously told billionaires to pay their bloody fair share of taxes. You've told Tucker Carlson that he's just a millionaire paid by billionaires, and that really struck a chord with people. I suppose, why is that? And what do you think, which direction are we headed? Are we headed the right direction right now? Do we have to change the ship? Or are things okay, and if we just want meaning, we can just keep improving it?
I have no idea. I'm pretty worried about the state of the world right now. Okay. I'll be honest. I'm one of those historians who's not afraid anymore to use the F word, the fascism
by all
word,
means.
to describe.
Away you go.
Okay. Well, to describe some things that are currently going on in this world, like the broader trend, and I've written about this in Utopia for Realists, for example. Like materially speaking, we have made a lot of progress. Yes, we are richer, we are healthier, we are wealthier than ever. Child mortality has been going down for a long time. Extreme poverty has been going down. We see amazing scientific breakthroughs. I mean, cancers that were incurable are now getting treated. The blind can see, people who were never able to walk are suddenly able to walk with implants. It's just astonishing. We live in an age of marvels and wonders. But then at the same time, these dark horsemen, these ghosts of the past, they keep coming back. And it's now happening around the world. It's democracy itself that is backsliding, not just for a couple of years, but now for almost 2 decades in a row. Democracy is declining. In Europe, we've seen it in Poland, in Hungary, and at the same time, we see this incredible immorality among elites. Indeed, I was in Davos, 6 years ago, where all these incredibly rich people and powerful people gather to talk about climate change while they've flown in with their private jets, to talk about their silly philanthropy while they do very little actually to make this world a better place, while they have hugely corrupt business models and evade and avoid billions of dollars in taxes. There's just a deep lack of moral seriousness among elites. Anyway, all of that is pretty depressing. Now, what gives me hope? As a historian, I see that we've been there before. So I talked about abolitionism. Like, the British abolitionist movement was actually a counter movement against the immorality of the late 18th century. So back then, there were a lot of politicians who were incredible alcoholics. There was a huge amount of abuse in Parliament. A lot of politicians slurred their speeches. So many of them were super corrupt, were being bought by wealthy interests. 1 in 5 women at the time in London was a street prostitute. And then people like William Wilberforce stood up and said, we need to campaign against this incredible immorality, this corruptness of all these leaders. And abolitionism is going to be the main ingredient of that campaign. This is the clearest example of deep immorality. So in a way, they made doing good cool again, prestigious again. That was like a complete societal cultural turnaround. Same thing happened in the US with the move from the Gilded era to the Progressive era. And here's the thing. I think it can happen again. And I think now is exactly the right time to bring virtue back in fashion, to basically say that the lazy and the selfish people are the most boring and silly idiots who don't deserve our attention, and that the people who contribute the most, who do the most, the strongest shoulders, who help the most others, they deserve our praise, our recognition. That's what I hope, and what I'm trying to contribute to this cultural shift.
When I look at Australia, and I'll be curious to see if you've looked at Australia, our politics and anything like that, but we're seeing record expensive housing. Housing in Australia is like healthcare in America. It's for the highest bidder, and it's completely privatized. We have a monopoly-driven economy with 2 or 3 major players in each thing. We give away our resources for free to foreign-owned American, Chinese, Japanese corporations that get our resources for free. They don't pay tax. I like to blame people. Who is to blame for the situation that I just described, that Australia's in, that the US is in, that a lot of the West is similar in its, neoliberal approach to excessive privatization, a shrinking middle class. Things are getting harder and harder. Cost of living's going up. Who do you point your finger at and just say, this is your fault, I'm blaming you?
I would say, in the end, it's always the people in power, right? Power in general is a corrupting force. It makes you more selfish. And selfish people tend to have a much more zero-sum mindset, where they're like, if you start having a better life, then I will probably pay the price for that. It's just that on their own, they couldn't do it. Right? On their own, the billionaires and the super wealthy could never rule us. They need the selfishness of the middle class as well. So they need the selfishness of the homeowners. They need the selfishness of the pension holders, who get immediately angry when their pensions are going down. And very often, pretty dubious financial products are being used, to make money for these pension holders. And it's true for migrants as well, right? They want you to be afraid of these migrants who come and take your jobs, or who will destroy social cohesion, et cetera, et cetera. So it's the oldest trick in the book, right? Divide and rule, make people angry at each other, and stay in power.
From where I'm sitting, it does look zero sum. Like in Australia, when these US owned, Japanese owned gas cartels, and I don't know if you're aware of this is kind of what blew up my platform initially. Rutger, we give over half of our gas to these corporations for free. Then they sell it on the global market, make billions. They don't pay tax. And then we have a gas shortage because we gave it to them to sell. And then we have to buy our own gas back at Europe prices. And it seems...
Oh, they're very high.
And we have, the technical term is a shit ton of gas. We've got a shit ton of everything in Australia. But it is, in a sense, from where I'm sitting, zero sum when we give this corporate class of billionaires, when they have our politicians here and they pass legislation that allows them to keep doing this. We foot the bill for our healthcare, for our housing, for our roads. Our taxes, most of the burden is on wages. And so in this economy, it almost seems zero sum because we're picking up the tab whilst they're getting off scot-free, to pick a certain few industries by name.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, we almost have an inverse welfare society, right? They want us to think that we live in a kind of trickle-down economic situation where, the wealth is created at the top and then it trickled down to the benefit of us all. But the reality is actually the other way around. So we have the people in the so-called essential jobs, teachers, nurses, plumbers. If they go on strike, then pretty much everything collapses. But they earn relatively little money. And then we have people who have fancy resumes, who maybe drafted those fancy contracts for those perhaps corrupt politicians, to make a lot of money on that gas. They contribute very little to society. But yeah, then they are supposed to be the strongest shoulders that carry us all? No, obviously not. As I said, it's like an inverse welfare society where very often the scroungers, the real scroungers, are at the top, not at the bottom. But there's a huge amount of propaganda being thrown over us, trying to make people believe that you should actually be afraid of those poor benefit holders, for example, or the poor migrants who are coming to take your jobs and take your wealth away. And sometimes, some politicians have gotten really good at that game because sadly, humans aren't angels. Like we have some dark sides. We are susceptible to xenophobia. We are, in some cases, easily misled. And what you need as a medicine against this is obviously a broad popular movement being led by, I would say, righteous leaders and politicians who want to stand on the right side of history. And I think there are always people like that. There are always people like that. We got to find them. We got to support them and build movements around them.
I want to get you on this program because, like you said, you went to Davos, the billionaires fly into their private jets, and you said, pay your taxes, you bludgers. Like, come on. And then on Tucker Carlson, he's trying to stoke up some rage against the elites, of which you pointed out, hey, you are one of them, and you are doing the stoking of this rage. So I have a platform where I make punters aware. And in your book, I felt a little personally attacked. I felt like I was this generation who sees the problem, who goes, you know what? I'm going to make people aware. I'm going to try and help punters understand the complex system that's rigged against them so that at the very least we know how we're getting screwed and how we're getting scammed. But in your book, you kind of have a few shots at awareness isn't enough, making people aware enough. So, Rutger, it's a free shot, mate. Come at me.
Okay.
I'm part of the problem. I'm this millennial Instagram class, lay it on me, and then we can put Rutger destroys social media influencer for not doing enough.
Yeah. Okay, let's go. You're so fucking lazy, man. You're just making podcasts.
Yes.
Build a movement, right?
Yes.
Get people out in the streets, right? Have an actual plan. You can whine about housing costs all day, but we already know that, right? There's already a huge amount of awareness. Like we don't come out of a cave or something like that. The question is, how are we going to fix this? How are we going to build the actual political power? How are we going to win elections, right? How are we going to hold politicians accountable? Do you even know how a law gets made, right, in Australia? What are all the steps that go into it, right? What are the most important lobby groups here? Who is really holding it back, right? I want you to turn into a radical nerd. So make this podcast super wonky, right? Start with the most boring reports you can find, because when it gets boring, that's where the real action happens, right? And that's where the money is. This is the thing. Like a lot of pundits, punters, whatever podcasts, it's like it's political hobbyism, man. A lot of people listen to you because they're just lazy and they're like, let's waste an hour on this boring historian.
And I feel smart and informed.
Action in the end. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, now I can win in the group chat, right?
Yeah.
Now I can win in the comment section.
Some form of moral masturbation.
No one gives a shit.
Makes you feel good, doesn't do anything.
Yeah, exactly. Look, of course, awareness is important, right? So I do see the value of spreading ideas, keeping people informed and all of that. But it's just a start, right? After that, there's a whole long process, which is about building political power, winning elections, coming forward with the right proposals, then also making sure that these proposals are actually implemented correctly. I mean, I spoke to a policy entrepreneur recently who said that, like getting a law passed is probably around 10 to 20% of the work. Implementation, that's 80%. so many good ideas backfire. In the book, I've got many examples. I talk about fair trade, for example. Sounds great, right? Right? It sounds lovely. Oh, yeah, no, pay a little bit extra to help that poor farmer far away. Well, look, this has been extensively studied, and I have found very few positive studies about the actual effect of that. Most economists agree that very little of that money actually ends up with these poor farmers. Most of it ends up with the middlemen. So I don't know. It's not a happy message, but in the fight against injustice, we want to win, right? We want to make sure that what we do actually is effective. So again, long story, but have some skin in the game, understand what you're doing, build political power, and then make change happen.
And it sounds like the key is a bunch of nerds who come on board to follow these solutions all the way through, to understand how power works, because there is a current system that exists to exploit any loophole it can. I was talking to someone who writes legislation and makes legislation, and it seems as if there's so much effort, as I'm in the political space here in Australia, and I'm like, hey, let's make these bludgers pay tax. Let's have a corruption commission that looks at our politicians and stops them from being corrupt and investigates them. And then we go, yeah, great. We got everyone to pay attention for 10 seconds. We got some political momentum. And then we maybe at best passed a law. So our government passed this corruption commission. And as it was being passed, the nerds were saying it's got to have public hearings. It's got to have this piece in it so that we know it's functioning correctly. The government teamed up with the opposition because they both knew it would be bad for both of them. So they teamed up, passed this half-assed version of it. And what do you know? It's not functioning as it ought to. But it's no longer on the political conversation because we're up against this machine that will corrupt anything it can. And bloody hell, Rutger, it is disheartening to get all this momentum to make some positive change. And it turns out that there's some massive effects. And all I'm hearing is the punters listening going, see, that's why I don't bother. That's why I don't try. Because even when we try, this machine is far more sophisticated and it will turn any good thing we do into like the rules in California that, are supposed to protect homeowners, but in the end it just helps rich NIMBYs have their mansions and not rezone so that we can have more houses.
Yeah. Well, look, I guess that destroying the Death Star was pretty difficult as well, but it's satisfying when it works. So it's still worth it. As I said, it took 75 years to get women the right to vote in the U.S. It took half a century to abolish slavery in Great Britain. And it took an enormous coalition of people who very often didn't agree with one another and also had very different skill sets. So I don't want to say it's only about the radical nerds. You need super smart campaigners and marketeers as well. In the late 18th century, they created the whole playbook that we still take for granted today. It was the first time in all of world history that there was a massive consumer boycott of British people who refused to put sugar in their tea, which is obviously a huge sacrifice for them.
For the Brits,
And there were the legal nerds. Like one of my favorite characters was James Stephen, who really understood everything about naval law. And he discovered this little loophole in British naval law. And he said to William Wilberforce, one of the main politicians, like, hey, you know what you got to do? This year, don't propose to abolish the slave trade, but just say, let's abolish the foreign slave trade. They can't be against that because at the time Britain was in war with France, Napoleon. And obviously, this was rather easy to do, so most politicians weren't even paying attention. This act passed when only, I think, around 30 parliamentarians were even present during the vote. And then it turned out, and this is what James Stephen knew, is that actually almost all British slave ships were flying on their foreign flags. And why were they doing this? Because they wanted to dodge British legislation, like the minimal legislation that already existed that limited the number of enslaved people they could carry on these ships. So what James Stephen knew, and he was one of the few people who actually understood that by abolishing, banning the foreign slave trade, you would ban 3/4 of the national slave trade as well. I mean, that's like, as a historian, that's like, when I read those stories, that's like pure satisfaction to me. That's like, I guess, the historian's version of an orgasm. When you read about people like that.
Oh.
And yeah, that's also what you needed. But James Stephen could never have done that without the work of the campaigners and the marketeers. So I would never be someone who says, like, take climate change, for example. I wouldn't be the guy who says, like, ooh, Extinction Rebellion, we don't need that. We just need the smart lobbyists. No, of course not. We also need people who put pressure on politicians and who sometimes are just fucking annoying as well in the process. But that's sometimes what it takes to put a certain topic on the agenda. I find it funny that people who are in reality part of the same coalition can hate each other so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is a perennial problem on the left. Like people fighting each other all the time, the narcissism of minor differences. I'm like, come on, people, you're on the same team. You're just using a different skill set.
It's
and playing
a purity
different
code.
role in the ecosystem.
If we say to everybody, you need to have some moral ambition and you need to go, quit your job. It's like, well, I'm a nurse. I can barely afford rent. I'm really just struggling right now. I don't have the capacity or the opportunity or the connection to have any more moral ambition because I'm just trying to get by. And there's more and more in that bracket. So what's your message to punters at different stages and offering different skill sets? Because a lot of what you're doing seems to be targeting these privileged punters, these punters that have gone to nice universities that have their mummy and daddy being able to help them get a home, but then they go work for that Bermuda Triangle that you're saying, hedge funds, banks, lawyers, siphoning money for billionaires. We're using their brains for that. What's your different messages to different punters?
Yeah. So it's true that I was pretty angry when I was writing this book. I was really angry at people like me, honestly. You know, my friends that I went to college with, many of them have ended up as these boring corporate lawyers or strategy consultants or even bankers, God forbid. And I'm like, come on, like society invested in you, right? The nurses, they paid their taxes. The plumbers, they paid their taxes. So you could go to one of those fancy universities. And what are you doing? You're only destroying societal value, and you know it. Right? There's one study that I quote in the book that estimates that a banker destroys about 100 grand in wealth every single year. And that's probably a conservative estimate. Just in externalities, right? We all remember the financial crash, 2008, when taxpayers had to build the whole system out, right? That was the nurses and the plumbers who had to do that. So, yeah, I'm pretty angry at those people. And my message to them is not just like, ooh, check your privilege. No, it's use your privilege. Like, use all capital you have, cultural capital, financial capital, human capital, to make a big difference. And this is just, again, a fact of history that it was sometimes the more privileged people who did make a big difference. Like, at the same time, though, let's recognize that anyone can be morally ambitious. Like Rosa Parks, another example that I talk about at length in the book. She was a seamstress, and she was one of the great political strategists of the 20th century. A lot of people have been told this story that she was like this modest woman, right, who just that one moment refused to stand up, and that it was some kind of accident, like serendipity or something. No, not at all. She was a member of the Women's Political Action Group in Montgomery in Alabama. And they had been planning it for many, many months. And were these the richest people in society? Had they gone to Harvard or Yale or Princeton? Of course not. But they were fucking smart, and they changed the course of history. So we really should not succumb to the tyranny of low expectations or anything like that. But at the same time, we can kick those people who are doing relatively little. We could kick them in the ass because they should do much more. Like you don't need permission. I think for me that's like almost like a life lesson. Like when we are kids, especially if we have relatively privileged lives as I had, then very often you think, my parents, they understand everything about the world, right? They're in charge. They're the adults, and there will come a moment when when I'm 18 or 25 or whenever, when I feel like a real adult as well. And I think that the moment when you really turn into adult is the moment when you realize, fuck, everyone is just pretending. Like no one has any clue. That's when you're a real adult. Some people are like 10 years old when they realize that. Some people like me, I was like probably, I don't know, maybe in my early 20s when I really realized it. But yeah, that's important to to keep in mind when you look at politics as well. You can think like, oh, it's this grand conspiracy, how they've stolen all our gas and now we pay so much money and they're so powerful. Well, I've been to these places. I've been to Davos. And honestly, it's not some kind of big conspiracy or anything like that. These people aren't as smart as you think they are. You can take them down if you mobilize, if you organize, if you build the kind of political power, if you just enter the cockpit and start steering.
It's both simple. What I'm getting from you, it's both simple and very, very difficult. The simplicity in the belief in knowing that it's possible and persevering and knowing that it's possible, knowing that it will take some time, but it's also difficult in connecting, coordinating, and having the right strategy. And it might take 100 failed strategies to eventually find the one that works. If you would like to listen to that whole interview uncut and unedited, you can head over and join We the Punters over on Patreon. They help support the podcast, the YouTube, the TikToks, every other Punters politics project in the Punterverse we've got going on. So massive thanks to them over there. It comes up a little bit in the chat here, but I want to double down on something interesting that Rutger is doing right now. He started a school for moral ambition where the goal is to try and get the world's smartest people, those privileged punts that are taking those massive paychecks, maybe the people working in finance for hedge funds, Goldman Sachs, where we take the world's brightest people and we put them to work to help rich punts pay less taxes and help rich punts rig the rules in their favor. What if we took those people? What if we incentivized those people with money? Probably can't pay as much as they pay, but with enough money to make aspirational having some high level of moral ambition where lawyers can earn a decent living, unrigging the rules, making the rules rigged in our favor instead of against us by corporations. So I think that's a really interesting and practical approach. And I think it's worth considering where we sit in society, where I sit in society. What can I do anything? Because, some regular punters, and I kind of pushed him on this a little bit in the interview, like some regular punters, like we're just, struggling to get by. We're just going from paycheck to paycheck, rent's getting high up. So it's interesting. We can all work out where we sit and what can be done. And then I think our moral ambition we can do as much as we can, and that's okay. We don't have to compare to somebody else. But there are some people sitting on enormous privilege, enormous opportunity with massive, big, ginormous brains that they could put to work instead of working for massive billion-dollar corporations. They can begin to think, how can I use this knowledge to rig the system back in favor of regular Aussie punters? So I have a few more puntermon that I've reached out to that I'd like to line up and have chats with. But let me know if there's anyone you think I should be talking to and bring on the Punters pod. Send through any suggestions, any topic ideas, any guest suggestions through to oipunter@punterspolitics.com.